What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. We have quite a jam-packed show for you all, as we have quite a bit to recap, such as Oregon knocking off the top dog UCLA. How close is that Pac-12 race, and can UCLA pull away and win it all? And how about Purdue beating not one but two top 10 teams as they knocked off Wisconsin on Friday and they upset Minnesota on Sunday? Can the Boilermakers do it? Can they win the Big Ten? And how close is that Big Ten conference? And how about Long Beach State knocking off UC Santa Barbara? I don't know what happened with the Gauchos, but unfortunately it wasn't good. And the NCAA Women's Volleyball Division 3 tournament is up and running. Can Claremont McKenna pull out the victory? And can they win it all? So, hand me a volleyball, set up the net, and I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful afternoon or beautiful evening, depending on when you are listening from at this point of time. Currently, it is 5:03 p.m. Pacific time where I'm at. So, once again, thank you all for tuning in for episode 116 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, we have a couple of our sponsors to get into. So, our show isn't as jam-packed as last week, but it's still up there. So, the first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. I talked about them last week, and the season unfortunately ended for them, but I am very proud of how they competed week in and week out. And congratulations to the Riverside Disciples, and best of luck to them as they will look to win the championship. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get the second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You could follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors. You can follow them on Instagram at Southern California _Warriors. You can also follow them on Facebook by typing in the word Southern, then California, then Warriors. And they're all really cool people, including my buddy Larry B. The players are cool, the supporters are cool, the manager is cool, Coach Oki, and like I said, Larry B is cooler than the other side of the pillow. So, thanks for tuning in, buddy. Second sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Background Check International Businesses. Are you looking to background check a new hire on? Let Kit Fremen take care of that for you. Kit founded and has managed Background Check International since 1994, and he's here to help you with the screening process. Contact Kit and let him help make the hiring process that much easier. This business is used for professional background checks and not for the use of any crimes such as identity theft or other illegal activity. They do not have Twitter or Instagram, but they have Facebook. As long as you type in the word background, then check, then international, then dash, then BCI. You can also follow them on their website, www.bcint.com. So thank you to those two sponsors for being the official sponsors of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And definitely do give us a follow on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action from last week. So there were quite a bit of upsets from last week. I think there were more than the previous week. We'll start with the ones that didn't have too much magnitude, but had quite a bit of magnitude, as Long Beach State toppled UC Santa Barbara. Now, this to me is not really considered an upset, but it was kind of expected, just because, for those of you that read my tweet on the Set Point Twitter account, UC Santa Barbara has not won at the Pyramid since 2011. It's been that long of a drought for the Gauchos. I guess you could call them the Drought Shows. I'm so disrespectful. But for UC Santa Barbara, I just don't understand. This is a big matchup for you all, and you still turn into a pumpkin against Long Beach State. Long Beach State didn't even play its best game. They had their interim coach, for goodness sake. Remember, this is a team that fired their coach midway through the season, and this is a team that also has 2 seniors and 3 juniors. The rest are just freshmen and sophomores. Long Beach State was led by Katie Kennedy and Kashana Williams, who each had 11 kills. Miranda Cañas chipped in 7 kills. Erica Lovett and Tia Chavira also added 6 kills apiece. As for stats that kind of stood out to me, the fact that UC Santa Barbara hit 262 and lost is kind of mind-boggling to me. Like, there were more stats that Long Beach State got outdone in, yet they still managed to win. I guess this just goes to show you that UC Santa Barbara, no matter how good they are, and no matter how bad Long Beach State is, they still can't win at the Pyramid. It's so strange. I just don't get it. UC Santa Barbara was led by Michelle Owobedi, as she had 12 kills. She hit 345, which wasn't bad. They didn't have any other double-digit kill leaders, as Tasia Farmer had 9 kills, and Rowan Ennis and Tallulah Froley each chipped in 8 kills. So there was that right there. Long Beach State did actually outdo UC Santa Barbara in service aces and service errors. They had 1 less service error, but they had 7 aces compared to UC Santa Barbara's 2, which isn't really good if you ask me. So, all in all for the Beach, they wanted it more, and this loss really hurts UC Santa Barbara, because now they gotta hope that Hawaii loses along the way. Hawaii now has to lose another match in order for UC Santa Barbara to have any sort of shot at winning the Big West Conference. Like, it really is disappointing that UC Santa Barbara had to lose. Like, I thought this was possibly the year that they were going to break through, but unfortunately, that was not the case. And it looks like UC Santa Barbara is just going to have to win out. They're going to have to win out and hope that Hawaii loses along the way. Looking at the Hawaii schedule for this week, they do have 2 kind of tough matchups, as Hawaii has to travel to Bakersfield and they have to travel to Cal Poly. And Bakersfield has been off and on. Sometimes Bakersfield will have a solid outing, but then they'll have a match where they should have played a lot better. So, and then Cal Poly is still kind of the spoiler team, because they beat Santa Barbara, and it is nowhere near easy to beat Cal Poly at Cal Poly, even though the Gauchos kind of demonstrated that. But all in all, for Santa Barbara, this loss really sets them back, because now they no longer control their own destiny. They have to hope that Bakersfield comes up big, and then, or Cal Poly, or both, because now the Gauchos are no longer in the driver's seat. They did beat Hawaii once, but that was at Santa Barbara. Can they beat Hawaii at Hawaii? And now that Hawaii has fans in the stands, it's going to be 10 times tougher to beat Hawaii at Hawaii. So that was all. So that was on Saturday evening. This happened Saturday afternoon, as Pepperdine was able to upset number 19 San Diego. Now, Pepperdine had kind of fallen out of the top 25, and this was kind of their match that they needed to come up big in. They needed to win and pull out a big, stunning victory. And believe it or not, Pepperdine was actually down 2-0 in the match to San Diego. It looked as if this was going to be an easy afternoon for the Toreros. This was played at Jenny Craig Pavilion in San Diego, but then the Waves were able to win the next two sets, and they eventually won a marathon of a set 5, 17-15. There were 10 ties in that set, so that just goes to show you that Pepperdine had to dig really deep, and this kind of really helps solidify them a spot in the NCAA tournament, because Pepperdine was kind of that borderline team that they thought that they were going to be an easy in, but then they kind of fell off because of a loss to Pacific, and then other teams started to win like Illinois and Tennessee. But for Pepperdine, this was a crucial win. They got a big game from Rachel Ahrens, who was the West Coast Conference Player of the Week. She had 27 kills, and then Grace Chillingworth, who's only a freshman, had 19 kills. And Pepperdine seems to utilize their young players quite a bit. Last year, they utilized Meg Brown to great heights, and this year they're utilizing Grace Chillingworth quite nicely. I think this was like the return of Meg Brown, because she was not playing the previous two games, and Meg Brown can be huge in the middle blocker position. And if she plays, then it's a whole different aspect. But without her, Pepperdine, it has a little bit of an uphill climb. And this was a day after they got spanked by, or actually it was 2 days after they got spanked by BYU. BYU just took them to the shed. So Pepperdine pulled off an impressive win. Pepperdine will not win the West Coast Conference, let's get that out of the way, but this will help them get into the NCAA tournament as an at-large. San Diego, on the other hand, was led by Grace Froling, who had 21 kills. Katie Lukes had 13 kills. Some stats that stood out to me was that Pepperdine outdug San Diego 64-57. Now, San Diego outblocked Pepperdine 17-6, but the fact that Pepperdine was able to grind out that win speaks to high volumes of how resilient they are. Both teams missed a lot of serves, and their service error and service ace ratio weren't too far off from one another. So that's kind of a thing right there. And despite Pepperdine hitting only 205, courtesy of those 17 blocks that San Diego had, they were able to pull out the victory in 5 sets. And it was quite amazing. They hit 216 in the final set, which was not bad. And they held San Diego to only 7 kills, which was even more impressive. The real winner of that game between Pepperdine and San Diego was BYU, as BYU is now all alone in first place. Actually, no, they're not all alone in first place. They're 2 games up on San Diego as the conference is starting to dwindle down to its final 3 games. So all in all for San Diego, this loss really sets them back, and now they can't get a split of the conference. I could still see the Toreros making the NCAA tournament, but can they really win out the conference? They're not going to win the conference at this point. Looking at BYU's schedule, they play Pacific and St. Mary. Pacific might give BYU a tussle, but BYU has shown week in and week out that they can rise above anybody. And then, obviously, the last match could have a magnitude for San Diego, as that could help improve their seeding if they topple BYU, who is currently in the top 5. Spoiler alert. I'll get into that a little bit later, but San Diego really hurt themselves with this loss, especially getting reverse swept at home. Come on. I know Pepperdine needed this win, but you gotta come up big at home, San Diego. So keeping up with the West Coast and keeping up with Saturday, we had Oregon downing UCLA on Saturday night, and that was a huge win for Oregon. Oregon is nowhere near where they want to be in the Pac-12, but this does help them in terms of possible seeding. UCLA, on the other hand, this kind of now puts them in a tie for first place with Washington. I want to say UCLA has the tiebreaker in terms of head-to-head sets, but for some reason, UCLA just looked flat against Oregon. Yes, Oregon is a good team. They got a big game from Brooke Nunaviller, who had 16 kills, and they also got 9 kills from Carson Bacon, but I expected better from UCLA. Their kill leader was Mac May, who had 8 kills, and she only hit 81, which is not good. They did get 6 kills apiece from Allison Jacobs, Anna Dodson, and Elon McCall. but McMahon can't really have that performance. I think Oregon did a great job of preparing for her, and I also think Oregon did a great job of not missing too many serves, and something else that stood out to me was that Oregon outblocked UCLA 44-36, and they held UCLA to only a 204 hitting percentage while hitting 100 better than them. So, all in all for Oregon, this could improve their chances of them hosting a regional round when it comes to the NCAA tournament, because the NCAA tournament is back to having regional brackets instead of like all being in one place. So there's that. And then UCLA's got to be careful along the road. They do have a favorable schedule for on the way, as they play the Arizona schools. Then next week they play Cal, which has had a forgettable season. And then their last game, or last match of the season, they play USC, which USC has kind of been all over the place. And also, something else to keep in mind, now that I mentioned USC, Oregon actually beat USC last weekend, as they beat them in 5. But then something else to note is that they had to go 5 with them. They actually took the first 2 sets, then they lost this next 2 sets, and then they were able to eke out the 5th set. So the fact that Oregon had a major turnaround and was able to play a much better game against UCLA, a complete game, probably their best performance of the night, speaks to high volumes of how Oregon is a phenomenal team, and they definitely are up there in terms of teams to watch for. So now jumping over to the SEC, these 2 upsets happened on Saturday and Sunday. Mississippi State upset number 24 Tennessee. So the first matchup, Mississippi State won that in 4 sets, but the sets were very close. Mississippi State won the first set 25-23. Tennessee won the second set 25-22, and then Mississippi State won the third and fourth set 25-23. So all in all, it was rather close, except for that 4th set where Mississippi State never trailed. As Mississippi State was led by Lauren Myrick, who had 19 kills. Gabby Waden had 14 kills, and Shania Cromartie added 13 kills. The digs were high for both teams, as Mississippi State and Tennessee each had 70 and 69 digs as a whole. Tennessee, on the other hand, really outblocked Mississippi State, as they outblocked them 13-5 despite losing, which is still impressive. In terms of the service ace and service error battle, Mississippi State won the service error battle, as they only had 7 compared to Tennessee's 12. But Tennessee had 5 aces compared to Mississippi State's 2. And as for hitting percentages, Mississippi State had a hitting percentage of .221 compared to Tennessee's .237. So all in all, it was a back-and-forth affair, and Mississippi State was able to grind it out. This was played in Mississippi, in Starkville, but all in all, Mississippi State is really making the case for making the NCAA tournament. And then their second match actually had to go 5, as Mississippi State took the first 2 sets, 25-18, 25-23, and then Tennessee took the next 2, 28-26 and 25-15, as Tennessee actually dodged 2 match points from Mississippi State and then were able to take the third set. But then in set 5, Mississippi State won it 17-15, and they won the match. The win was huge for Mississippi State, as that actually knocked Tennessee out of the top 25. I'll get into that a little bit later, but this also keeps Mississippi State in contention for the SEC crown. They're actually only 1 game behind Kentucky, and that's rather impressive considering Mississippi State is not ranked and they're still in the thick of the SEC race. I really think Mississippi State does deserve to get into the NCAA tournament, and that could be a dangerous team right there. Their only 2 losses in the SEC were to Florida in 5 sets and Kentucky in 4 sets. So in this match, Mississippi State was led by Shania Cromartie, who had 16 kills. Gabby Waden added 15 kills, and Lauren Myrick had 13 kills. That's their 2-headed monster. Something else to note is that Mississippi State ran a 6-2 offense, as Margaret Dean and Gabby Coulter had 24 and 22 assists respectively. Despite getting outdug 93-76, Mississippi State really stepped up its block as they had a whopping 14 blocks, even though Tennessee outblocked them 15-14. They did hold Tennessee to 0 service aces, while Mississippi State added 10 of their own. And despite giving up 8 missed serves to the other team, it speaks to high volumes of how high their service ace and service error ratio was. It's rather impressive, actually. Tennessee was led by Morgan Fingal, who had 22 kills, and she only had 4 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of .346. Brianna Runnels added 13 kills, and Lily Feltz chipped in 12 kills. Surprisingly, Mississippi State only hit 165, but they were able to pull out that victory, and it speaks to high volumes of how Mississippi State is very underrated. I think the Bulldogs are a very underrated team, and they're under the radar, and I think they can make noise in these last few weeks. Now, you also got to remember that Kentucky does play Florida, and that's not an easy out. But Mississippi State, don't count them out just yet. Mississippi State does have a solid team, and who knows, maybe they can maybe they can actually make a late push for the not the NCAA championship, the SEC championship. Because looking at Mississippi State's schedule right now, according to their website, they have this week Arkansas, and that's going to be a great series. And then they close out the season at home against Auburn. That Arkansas matchup is very underrated. I think it's the battle of 2 unranked teams, and Arkansas kind of needs the win to stay intact for possibly making the NCAA tournament as well. So no one is sleeping on Mississippi State anymore. So remember, Kentucky still has 2 matches against Auburn this week, and then they got Florida the following week. 2 matches against Florida next week. So we'll see what happens with Kentucky, and let's see what happens with Mississippi State. So now jumping to everyone's favorite conference, the Big Ten Conference, and this is pretty much the last of the upsets. Last Friday, we had number 9 Purdue toppling number 4 Wisconsin, and this was actually the second match the second time that Purdue toppled Wisconsin this year. I have never seen that. I did not think Wisconsin was going to lose to Purdue, especially in Madison. But the fact that Purdue was able to go on the road, pick up the win, speaks to high volumes of how impressive Purdue is. The funny thing about Purdue was they only had 1 player in double digits in terms of kills, and that was Caitlin Newton. She had 19 kills. Jael Johnson was a close second in terms of getting double-digit kills, as she had 9 kills. Grace Cleveland, despite her having only a hitting percentage of 57, added 8 kills. As a team, Purdue only hit 197, but they held Wisconsin to only 128, and they held Wisconsin to only 1 player having double-digit kills, as Grace Loberg was the only one in double digits with kills, as she had 12. They did a really good job against Dana Redke, as she only had 6 kills, which is very impressive. Devin Robinson and Julia Orzel each had 8 kills. So all in all for Purdue, that was a very impressive win. To go on the road to beat that team it speaks to high volumes of how good Purdue really is and how they're over the loss to Michigan State. That was a bad loss for them, and they know that they're better than that. So it was a big win for Purdue. And what they also added to that resume, another big win, as they toppled Minnesota in 4 sets, as Purdue was led by Caitlin Newton, as funny enough, she had 19 kills, just like last time. Well, last match. So she came up big right there. She hit 226, but that was totally fine. Grace Cleveland, Jael Johnson, and Raven Colvin each had 7 kills. Again, this must have been a down week for Grace Cleveland, but she was able to come up big when it mattered most. Purdue outdug Minnesota by a small margin, 62-61, but they did hold Minnesota to only 165, which is darn right impressive. The blocks were also pretty much evenly matched, as Purdue had one more solo block than Minnesota. They each had the same number of block assists, which was darn right impressive. And Purdue is definitely flying under the radar, and they are definitely making themselves known. The only bad set that Purdue had was set 2. Like, most of the sets were very one-sided, as Purdue won the first set 25-12, they lost the second 25-14, they won the third 25-16, and the fourth set was the closest, as they won it 25-22. There were 15 ties in that fourth set. Minnesota was led by Stephanie Samity, who had 23 kills. The mind-blowing thing about those 23 kills is that she actually had half the kills that Minnesota produced as a team. So that's kind of a problem if Stephanie Samity is having to carry the team more times than not. Jenna Weenus added 10 kills. And then the third kill leader was Ari Mayabi, who had 6 kills. Once again, Minnesota hitting 165 does not bode well for the Gophers, as I know they're better than that, and I think they are a much better team than what they displayed. They have some good wins, and I feel last week I said Minnesota could possibly win the Big Ten, but if they play like that, it might not get easier for them. So, especially with how tight the Big Ten Conference standings are, because looking at the Big Ten Conference, the Big Ten Conference is currently led by Wisconsin and Nebraska, and both are 13-3. And I actually made a mistake on Twitter when one of my followers asked, does Wisconsin and Nebraska play one another? I said they didn't, and I misread that. They actually play on the 26th, but that's not until the following week. But Nebraska and Wisconsin are both neck and neck with one another in the standings. Don't count out Penn State, Minnesota, or Purdue. Those three teams that I just mentioned are one match behind, or one game behind, Wisconsin and Nebraska. And also don't count out Ohio State. They are still in the running as well, as they're 11-5. You never know what could happen, but it looks like Ohio State's chances are a lot slimmer than the other teams that I've just previously mentioned. Though they do have somewhat of a favorable schedule, with the exception of one match that I'll be getting into a little bit later. Illinois, I don't see them winning the conference, but I can see them making the NCAA tournament along with Michigan. And we don't know what to expect from Maryland, because they had an impressive non-conference schedule. They're currently 18-10, but I don't know if Maryland will get into the NCAA tournament. Because looking at Maryland's schedule, they have Northwestern, then they're at Illinois, then they're home against Ohio State, and then they are home against Minnesota. So that is a brutal three-game stretch after their matchup against Northwestern. So we'll see if Maryland can pull out the victory. It would be great to have a team like Maryland in the NCAA tournament, but how many teams can the Big West, or not the Big West, the Big Ten Conference really take? Like, if I had to guess, I'd probably say the NIVC is probably the future for Michigan State. And I'm not trying to say that in a negative way. I'm just saying that it's going to be very tough for the Terrapins to make the NCAA tournament, or the Terps. So it's a very close race in the Big Ten Conference. And it's also a close race in the Pac-12 Conference, as it's basically almost the same as the Big Ten. I really think it's anyone's conference, with the exception of a few. As looking at the Big Ten, or not the Big Ten, the Pac-12 standings, or as someone calls them, the Pac-10 standings, UCLA and Washington are both currently in first place. UCLA should have the tiebreaker over Washington in terms of sets, but currently, at the moment, Washington is ranked higher than UCLA, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Oregon, Utah, and Washington State are all 11-5. I don't see those teams winning the Pac-12, but you never know what could happen with these next few weeks. Stanford unfortunately had that stretch where they didn't have Kendall Kipp and Cammie Minor and Alex Lugay. But I still see Stanford making the NCAA tournament. You have to like their body of work despite them only being 14-10. And then, as for, I wouldn't say my team, but USC, a team that I kind of was a little disappointed in this season. They are basically grasping for straws at trying to make the NCAA tournament. They're 11-14, and they need to pretty much win out their entire games. Like, they have to win out all their matches in order to finish 500 and possibly, and it's a big possibly, make the NCAA tournament. Because they have the Arizona schools this week. They're home against, like, all their matches are actually at home, actually. They play Arizona on Friday, and then they play Arizona State on Sunday. Then they've got Stanford in the middle of the week, and then they finish off the season against UCLA. And that could be a spoiler matchup, or it could be their last gasp at a possible NCAA playoff berth. But for USC, it's kind of been that rough year. They've had quite a number of matches that I think they should have won. Like, for example, their second matchup against Colorado, they probably should have won. The reverse sweep against Oregon, they should have probably won that. And I think USC has talented players. It's just that they unfortunately could not utilize them to their advantage. Like, the first match of the season, they could not topple Denver, which that was kind of disappointing right there. They had the match won against Creighton, but unfortunately they just let it slip through their fingers. They lost at Hawaii as well. That was another loss that kind of put them behind the 8 ball. And then all in all, it just hasn't been the Trojans' year. I understand they had a rough year last year and they're still trying to rebuild, but I thought this team was going to be better than last year. But unfortunately, the Pac-12 is a dogfight, and unfortunately for USC, they're kind of on the bottom of that dog pile. So, especially when you have like Arizona and Arizona State still trying to vie for NCAA tournament berth. Like, Arizona and Arizona State do have some impressive victories, with Arizona State having a good number of NCAA tournament wins. Like, they could probably be a Final Four team in. So we'll see what happens with Arizona State and Arizona. But for right now, that is pretty much going to do it for the recap of the Week 12 matchups from last week. Now let's jump on into the AVCA Top 25 for this week. So 25 through 21 consists of Pepperdine at 25. Welcome back to the Top 25, Pepperdine. Illinois at 24, San Diego at 23, Washington State at 22, and Creighton at number 21. 20 through 16 includes Florida at 20, Stanford at 19, Western Kentucky at 18, Utah at 17, and Oregon at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Penn State at 15, Georgia Tech and UCLA tied for 13, Washington at 12, and Nebraska at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Ohio State at 10, Minnesota at 9, Kentucky at 8, Baylor at 7, and Purdue at 6. And then 5 through 1 consists of Wisconsin at 5, BYU at 4, Pitt at 3, Texas at 2, and number 1, and you're still number 1 team in the AVCA coaches poll is Louisville. Now, something to note as of right now, Louisville actually played a match this week, and they toppled Notre Dame in straight sets, and Louisville is starting to close in on that ACC title. Like, I really think Louisville could possibly be the team that wins it all this year. Like, it still remains to be seen because they have a lot of stiff competition to face. Like, it's up for grabs this year. Like, you look at Texas, which returns a majority of its players. Pitt is looking good. Like, I'm really excited to see that Pitt versus Louisville matchup next week. BYU is really surprising everybody. Wisconsin is still not a team to be trifled with. Purdue is starting to come alive. You can't count out Minnesota. Kentucky's still the reigning champs. Like, all in all for Louisville, it's not going to be an easy out for any of their any of the teams that they face, but I really think that Louisville is a phenomenal team, and they could possibly, hence the word possibly, win it all. But that said, they still got to remain humble, and they got to cross their T's and dot their I's, and they do got to prepare for that matchup against Pitt, and that's going to probably be how the ACC is decided. And I also can't sleep on Notre Dame. Like, Notre Dame, despite them sweeping on them, Notre Dame could possibly play spoiler, and this could basically be Notre Dame's last chance at making the NCAA tournament, even though I highly doubt that Notre Dame's going to make the NCAA tournament, just because they're under 500, and they had such a rough non-conference schedule. So all in all, for the Fighting Irish, they're basically trying to grasp at straws to make the NCAA tournament. So we'll see if that can happen. But that's going to do it for the AVCA Top 25. Let's actually jump to some NCAA Division III volleyball action. So the NCAA Division III volleyball tournament is underway, as they're actually in the Elite Eight, and believe it or not, I actually talked about this last week with Daryl Trujillo. So that was pretty fun. And one team that we talked about was Claremont McKenna, as they actually managed to get all the way to the quarterfinals. They actually won their region, which was quite nice, and they will play Barry in the quarterfinals on November 18th, which is Thursday. So that's going to be a very fun matchup, and I did not know Claremont McKenna was the number 2 seed. I haven't been paying attention to the NCAA Division III tournament, and I'm guilty of that, but that would mean that this show gets turned into maybe a 2-hour show, and I don't really want that. So, looking at the remaining teams, the quarterfinals consist of Juanita versus MIT, which I believe is Massachusetts Institute Technology, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other quarterfinal consists of Wisconsin EAU Clare versus Tufts. And then Claremont McKenna takes on Barry, and then Trinity of Texas takes on Calvin. So all 8 teams that I just mentioned are the 1 through 8 seeds. And thank you, Larry B. He says he's still tuned in, and he's just watching the Monday Night Football game. I appreciate you, Larry. So, yeah, back to the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. All 8-seeded teams were able to make it to the Elite 8, which is darn right impressive. And I don't really mean to be a homer, but I really want to see Claremont McKenna possibly win that second NCAA championship, because they've only lost one match all season, and that was I believe that was to Calvin, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, Claremont McKenna has been really impressive. Despite them not having a big game from Jenna Holmes, they got some other reinforcements. So all in all, for Claremont McKenna, it would be great to see them win it all, but this, in terms of the NCAA tournament, is going to be really tough. Looking at Claremont McKenna, they were able to get past their opponents. They got past Aurora in the first round in 4 sets, and they got past Bethel of Minnesota in 3 sets, and then they barely got past Wartburg in 5 sets. As I want to say that the matchup against Wartburg, yes, they did reverse sweep them. Wartburg took the first 2 sets, and then Claremont, and I keep saying Claremont McKenna, it's Claremont Mud, which, oops. So Claremont Mud then won the next 3 sets, and they won the 5th set 18-16, which was darn right impressive. And the fact that they were able to do that despite Jenna Holmes not having her best game. She had 16 kills, but she only hit 92, which is not good. Brianna Bell had 18 kills and she hit 500, which was very awesome. And she also did not have a hitting error. So that was impressive stuff from her. And she also chipped in 9 digs. Holmes also chipped in 30 digs. So what she made up for in her errors, she made up for defensively, which was darn right impressive. And also Jackie Jones chipped in 12 digs as well. So good stuff right there. And then Melanie Williams also had 6 digs to go along with her 15 kills. And then we also can't forget about Audrey Sawyer, who had 12 kills. She chipped in 5 digs, and she had a service ace. So all in all for Claremont Mud, or CMS, I'm just going to call them CMS just because why not? So to CMS, I really think they can win it all, but they're going to have to be a little bit more careful. And I would like to see them get a rematch with Calvin. If they can get a rematch with Calvin, that would be great. Because Calvin was the team that has been their lone blemish on the season. And I think Claremont Mud is a much better team, or CMS is a much better team. So we'll see what happens on Thursday. And then the semifinals are the day after, and the championship is Saturday, which I'm actually against that. I understand NCAA Division 3 kind of has it worse than NCAA Division 1, but that's not a whole lot of rest for all these teams. And then some of these teams have to travel, so that's not fun for those teams playing 3 matches in 3 nights. I'm against that, but it is what it is. It's not like NCAA Division 1 where that division basically gets, I think a week off, I want to say. They get some sort of, time to, travel from the regional finals all the way to the quarterfinals. So, all in all, I'm kind of against how the NCAA Division 3 gets the shaft, but I can't really, fix it or anything. It is what it is, unfortunately. So, there's that. So that was some NCAA Division 3 volleyball talk. Just a little brief recap of the NCAA Division 3 tournament. And here's hoping we get to see these teams duke it out, and we will have a winner crowned this weekend. So, I look forward to it. And I look forward to seeing who will be crowned the champion of NCAA Division 3. So there's that. I'm just looking at who Juanita has beaten, as Juanita actually barely beat Babson in the round of 16. Yeah, it was the round of 16. So that goes to show you the NCAA tournament is up in the air. So, sticking with the lower level, well, not lower level, but for the NCAA non-Division 1 action, let's jump to some NCAA Division 2 action as Cal State San Bernardino capped off its perfect record in conference play, as they are currently on a 20-match winning streak, and they went a perfect 18-0 in conference. This weekend, they will be participating in the 2C2A tournament, as it's basically the California Collegiate Athletic Association Championship. So I think it's going to be quite fun, and I was actually invited to attend, but I've got such a busy schedule, and unfortunately I can't attend, and I feel bad because, I really wanted to attend this and bring you all coverage of not Division 1 volleyball, but Division 2 volleyball, just to break the mold a bit, just because that's what it's all about. And I don't like being just mainstream and all that. So it's just my little opinion and just my 2 cents and whatnot. So we'll see what happens in this tournament, as I look forward to seeing who will possibly be the champion of this tournament. It is quarterfinals, then semifinals, then finals. Looking at the standings, it looks like it's going to be. It looks like there is it's a 6-team tournament, as the top two teams in the tournament are Cal State San Bernardino and Cal Poly Pomona. That team has actually been quite impressive, actually. Cal Poly Pomona, that team has drastically turned its season around, turned its program around, and their only 3 losses were in conference play, which 2 of them were to Cal State San Bernardino, and then the other was to Cal State Los Angeles. So there's that. So by my understanding, San Francisco State and Cal State San Marcos will be doing battle against one another, and then Cal State LA and Sonoma State will be doing battle with one another. So I presume the winner of the San Francisco State Cal State San Marcos matchup will face the winner of Cal Poly Pomona, or will face Cal Poly Pomona, and then the winner of Cal State LA versus Sonoma State will face Cal State San Bernardino. It's either that or they basically do it as highest seed faces Pomona while the lowest seed faces San Bernardino. So, again, I'm no expert on the 2C2A, but I do want to show them some love just because they're volleyball too. And I definitely do want to give a shout out to Daryl Trujillo for introducing me to this last week. And if anything, hopefully, if my schedule does clear up, I will be there to provide coverage and whatnot. So we'll see what happens when it comes to the stretch down the road. But all in all, I wouldn't hold my breath to it. Just because I'm a busy guy this week. And if anything, I'd probably catch the finals. So, but definitely do check this out. This whole thing will be played at Cal State San Bernardino, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, it is going to be a very fun tournament. It's always great to see that sort of thing, and I wish the best of luck for everybody, just because I think it's going to be a fun tournament, and San Bernardino is basically the tournament host because they are the number 1 seed. And also, they have the best record. So, I still see San Bernardino making it to the NCAA tournament, as well as Cal Poly Pomona. The only way they don't make the NCAA tournament is if they get bageled all around in the semifinals, and then we have chaos all over the place. But still, I still see both Pomona and San Bernardino making the NCAA tournament in Division II. So that's going to do it for some NCAA Division II women's volleyball talk. We'll take ourselves a little bit of a break. When we come back, we'll have some more NCAA volleyball talk happening as I'll be previewing the Week 13 matchups, and I'll also be talking some CIF State Volleyball action as what has been going on in the Open Division. Who has been winning and who has been losing in terms of the NorCal versus SoCal teams? You'll have to find out after the break. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' the NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' the NorCal Sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' the NorCal Sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom revved harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on 90 Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davidson.
It's your boy, Dentarius Lava.
And we are the hosts of Fast Break here on IE Sports Radio, where we discuss everything in the world of basketball from prep to the pros.
You guys should definitely check us out, man. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We got all the basketball information you guys need, so we look forward to you guys listening in.
And please do, because we are the best basketball show on this side of the Mississippi. And please do check us out on Twitter at FastBreakISR. D-Lock, where's our time again?
8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That give you guys plenty of time on a Sunday.
Tune in.
And we are back with Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate y'all tuning in, whether it's on the playback or whether it's live. You could check out all of our amazing shows on several different streaming platforms such as iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, JioSaavn. The list goes on and on. So thank you once again for all of your support. I definitely appreciate it. And also, iSports Radio has a Patreon account, and if you aren't a patron to our Patreon account, definitely please do so. We want to keep iSports Radio going. Definitely want to give a shout out to the two that are the patrons of our Patreon account. I definitely do appreciate you two for helping out iSports Radio keep the lights on, as well as our sponsors, the SoCal Warriors and the Background Check International businesses. So I definitely appreciate you, and more importantly, iSports Radio greatly appreciates everybody, because we are by the fans for the fans, and we want to keep this thing going. So now let's jump on into the second half of our show. So let's jump on into some high school volleyball, as we have some CIF State Volleyball action going on. And it's been a great ride for the CIF State Volleyball Championship. And, I'm only going to talk the Open Division just because that's where all the nationally ranked teams are. So, when it comes down to the CIF State Championships in terms of the Southern California Division, there haven't really been too many upsets. In the first round, we had Marymount defeating Village Christian 25-9, 25-22, 25-20. We had Miracosta defeating Vista Murrieta, which that was basically 4 versus 5, 25-21, 27-25, 24-26, 25-23, so close sets all across the board. We had Mater Dei defeating La Costa Canyon 25-21, 25-20, and 25-20. Then we also had Cathedral Catholic beating Lakewood in 4 sets, 25-21, 26-24, 23-25, and 25-17. So that was the quarterfinals because this is an 8-team bracket. 8-team bracket for each region. The NorCal region. Now, the NorCal region, on the other hand, that had quite the biggest upset that, in my opinion. In my opinion, the biggest upset came from St. Francis, the number 8 seed, toppling the number 1 seed Marin Catholic in 5 sets, 26-24, 26-28, 25-20, 15-25, and 15-11. Elsewhere in the bracket, there were no upsets. As we had Menlo defeating Clovis West 25-19, 25-22, 25-18. Lincoln defeating St. Ignatius 25-15, 25-11, and 25-15. And then Archbishop Mitty, the CIF Girls Volleyball NorCal Powerhouse, defeating Branson in 5 sets, 25-18, 25-19, 17-25, 22-25, and 15-12. I called them a powerhouse even though they barely got past Branson. But this is the beauty of the state playoffs. Anyone can be beaten. In the regional semifinals, jumping back to Southern California, we had Marymount sweeping Miracosta 25-11, 25-16, and 25-18. And then the other semifinal, we had Cathedral Catholic defeating Mater Dei 26-24, 25-17, and 25-22. I was a little surprised that Mater Dei lost this one. I thought Mater Dei was way better than Cathedral Catholic, but I guess Cathedral Catholic has drastically improved because at the time when I saw Cathedral Catholic, I saw Cathedral Catholic 2 different times. The first time I saw them was in the Dave Mose tournament in Orange County. They were runner-up to Lakewood, which Lakewood eventually had I wouldn't say a collapse, but an ending to forget. And then Cathedral Catholic wound up winning the Redondo Power Classic, even though they kind of got a little bit of a challenge from Harvard Westlake, which is also playing in a regional final, but that's in the lower division. But I was very surprised to see Mater Dei getting swept. Like, very rarely will you see Mater Dei getting swept in a best 3 out of 5 match. The only time that happens is if they're facing an opponent and Mater Dei is like super young and inexperienced. But that was not the case for Mater Dei. They had quite a bit of talent on their team, but unfortunately for them, Cathedral Catholic just had a little bit more punch to them. And also, playing on the road is tough. Like, Mater Dei is a fairly young team. They have like a mixture of sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And then obviously them coming back from COVID also did not help, even though they got to play 4 matches in the Trinity League. Actually, no, they got to play 5 matches overall, but 4 of them came from the Trinity League. And all in all, for Cathedral Catholic, they really flexed their muscle, and they really proved to everyone that they're just not an ordinary San Diego team. They are a powerhouse San Diego team. So, good stuff from Cathedral Catholic. And then on the NorCal side of the things, we had number 8 St. Francis downing number 4 Menlo in straight sets 25-22, 25-21, and 25-19, as they will go on to the regional finals to take on Archbishop Mitty, which swept Lincoln 25-22, 25-20, and 25-20. And St. Francis is this tournament's Cinderella, as I think they're the worst. I won't say the worst, but they're certainly probably the lowest ranked of all of these teams, not just in the southern section, but in terms of overall rankings. So the fact that St. Francis is 1 win away from a state finals appearance is quite astounding, but they're going to have to take down a very tough Archbishop Mitty team. Archbishop Mitty kind of fell off as their then head coach Brent Alcaraz Cesar stepped down last season after he wanted to spend more time with his family and whatnot, and the dude was a long-tenured head coach. And all in all, the fact that Archbishop Mitty is back is absolutely astounding. I did not expect them to be back this soon, but they have pulled off some big wins, and I think that Mitty can possibly win state. I think they are the kryptonite to some of these Southern California teams, if not most of these Southern California Supreme teams. But depending on how they do, depends on if they can get to the state final. I think they definitely can. If I was a gambling man, I would take Archbishop Mitty. As for the Southern California bracket, that consists of Marymount and Cathedral Catholic. That's going to be a very, very good matchup. I personally would have liked to have seen Mater Dei versus Marymount for a third time, but unfortunately, Mater Dei just couldn't take care of their end. The thing about Marymount is that they are still undefeated, and this is a very tough team, and that's going to be playing at home, mind you. And I think Marymount isn't really the biggest gymnasium of all. I haven't been to their gymnasium, but I've seen pictures of their gym. It's not big, if you ask me. And this is no knock on Marymount. Like, Marymount is located near UCLA and LMU, but I have heard that Marymount's gymnasium is not that big, and it's kind of worrisome for certain teams considering it's tough to pass. But we'll see what happens with Marymount and Cathedral Catholic. I feel Cathedral Catholic will basically have to stress them out and force them to play their best. I don't think Marymount is sweeping this matchup. If Marymount actually sweeps Cathedral Catholic, just give them the crown right now, because they're 2 wins away from completing an undefeated state championship run. And I can also see Marymount being the national champions. And with that being said, I still have to eat more crow, because I said on the Set Point Twitter account, I said I feel there's a possibility that Mater Dei and Marymount could face each other in the state playoffs. Well, Cathedral Catholic said otherwise. So, unfortunately, that won't be happening, but I am proud to eat my crow. So, I'm a man who will still eat crow whenever I'm wrong, and I will not ducks anybody. So, I definitely am looking forward to Marymount versus Cathedral Catholic. I unfortunately will not be at that matchup. I will be at the CIF State Division II Girls Volleyball Regional Final as my team, Newport Harbor, will be taking on Carlsbad, the top seed Carlsbad, in the finals, and I will be there. But I could, hence the word could, possibly be at the Marymount versus the CIF Open Division State Championship. I'm just going to say this right now. If Marymount does win state this year, they're national champions. There's no way anyone else can convince me that Marymount, which would finish 35-0, which will have won all the most prestigious tournaments, also winning their section, also winning state, you can't convince me that Marymount would not be a national champion. I get there are other teams that are playing still in other states, but Marymount, to me, has won so many. They won the most prestigious and toughest tournaments out there, and for them to win state would be the cherry on top, and you have to crown them as national champions. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm not trying to be a Southern California homer, but that's just me. Anyway, so that is going to do it for high school volleyball talk. So let's jump into the NCAA women's volleyball matches to watch for this week, as I'll be going over that, and I'll be sending you all on your way after I do so. So the party doesn't really start until Friday, but on Friday we have number 3 Pitt tied for number 13 Georgia Tech in some ACC volleyball action. This is basically the battle of who will still stay in contention for the ACC crown. Georgia Tech has basically lost both of their matchups to Louisville, so they would basically have to run the table and hope Louisville loses out, which I highly doubt will happen. But for Pitt, this is kind of their little tune-up game before they play Louisville. This could possibly be a trap game, as Pitt actually had to go 5 with Syracuse last Friday. And I liked how their Twitter account was making references to Taylor Swift songs, as she just released her, I wouldn't say her new album, but her Red album in deluxe version or something like that. Either way, I think Pitt will beat Georgia Tech, but I would not be surprised if Georgia Tech had to bring out everything in Pitt, so which would be the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we'll see. And then also we have number 15 Penn State at number 11 Nebraska. This is basically a crucial battle, as Nebraska has been the kryptonite for Penn State through the past seasons. This time we will see if Nebraska can beat Penn State and stay atop of the Big Ten Conference. Penn State is nowhere near out of the championship conversation, but they do have a big week this week, and they have to, hence the word have to, win at Nebraska. If they could do so, they will be in good shape. Just because Nebraska losing would mean that they would be closer and closer to the Big Ten Conference Championship. And the Big Ten Conference is very much up for grabs. It's going to be a dogfight, a fight to the finish. I think it could be decided in the last game of the season, of the regular season. And then jumping over to the Pac-12, we have number 16 Oregon at number 22 Washington State. This is a huge matchup for both teams, as this could improve both of their teams' possible seeds. If Oregon wins and they win the rest of the weekend, that could basically be the stamp for them possibly being a top 16 team. Because if you're a top 16 team, you basically get to host regionals. And if you do so, awesome. For Oregon, they're kind of on the bubble, but I think after their win over UCLA, they are oozing with confidence. They just cannot have a letdown against Washington State, because Washington State is a big trap game for Oregon, because on Sunday, Oregon plays Washington, and that is definitely a rivalry game. So Oregon has to take care of business against Washington State on Friday before looking ahead to Saturday. Or Sunday. But speaking of Saturday, in terms of noteworthy matchups, we don't have too many, but from the SEC, we have two noteworthy and, in my opinion, underrated matchups. The first one is Mississippi State at Arkansas. Now, Arkansas needs the wins in order to keep them afloat of possibly being an at-large team. It all depends on if they can win this 1 out of 2. If they can win 1 out of 2, then good for them. I think they could definitely get in as an NCAA tournament team, because Arkansas is certainly not winning the SEC. Let's get that out of the way. However, they do boast an impressive 17-7 record. 5 of those losses came in conference, and I think Arkansas is very underrated. Arkansas does have some impressive victories, and they can only improve as they're trying all right. They can make the NCAA tournament, but it's all about if they could cross their T's and dot their I's and whatnot, because they've had some competitive losses. They took Kentucky to 5 sets. They took Florida to 5 sets. They took Tennessee to 4 sets, and they do have some stiff competition, but I think Arkansas definitely needs the win if they want to possibly win their way into a possible NCAA tournament matchup. So we'll see if the Razorbacks can get the win. I feel they can, but they're going to have to play pretty much perfect. So, and actually, wait a minute. Actually, hold on. Hold the phone, Hannah. Looks like, yeah, I was going to say they do play Mississippi State. I actually just double-checked to see Arkansas' schedule, and they actually play Texas A&M on Wednesday. So that's another one of those rivalry matchups that Arkansas has to win. And I kind of accidentally forgot about that matchup. I didn't know because Texas A&M is not really the most relevant team when it comes to the SEC. I mean, they used to be good, and then they kind of took 10 steps backward. You all know how I feel about Texas A&M. I went on a rant on them last year, and boy howdy, it was not a pretty rant. Like, Texas A&M is so bad, despite them being 500, they are the third worst team in the SEC. I'm sorry to say, but it's the truth. So, yeah. So I could see Arkansas winning that matchup, no problem. It's just that Mississippi State has a goal. Like, they're thinking NCAA tournament, but they could think even bigger by winning the SEC. Because if they get past Arkansas, they're for sure going to beat Auburn. There's no doubt about that. And then Kentucky has to deal with Florida. And if for some reason Kentucky loses both those matchups to Florida, Mississippi State would be the winner of the... Well, actually, no. I can't say that just because Florida would have the tiebreaker over Mississippi State in terms of head-to-head matchups if that were to happen. Speaking of Florida, however, Florida does have a tricky little matchup this weekend, a tricky 2-game series as they play South Carolina on Saturday and on Sunday. So, South Carolina is kind of that under-the-radar team that everyone seems to forget about. I think South Carolina could give Florida a matchup. I think, based on what happened a couple weeks ago, I feel that South Carolina can take on anyone when it comes to the SEC. Like, they beat Kentucky a couple weeks ago. I think they could beat Florida. I'm not saying it will happen, but I could see them giving them a battle. I think Florida needs to be very careful with this matchup against South Carolina. And this could be a possible trap series for the Gators, just because South Carolina did start off ranked, and then they kind of fell off when SEC play started. Like, I think for those that remember last season, in the abbreviated season, or last spring, South Carolina actually beat Florida. And this actually happened in the fall. My apologies, but South Carolina actually beat Florida in the fall, and I was very surprised. And with how inconsistent Florida can be sometimes, I would not be shocked if South Carolina actually won. I think South Carolina is a good team, but the problem with the Gamecocks is that they're kind of not doing so hot in the SEC. Yes, the SEC has been a battle, but I expected South Carolina to do a little bit better in the SEC. But they just cannot find that balance of pulling out big wins. That said, South Carolina could also better its chances of winning a spot into the NCAA tournament if they knock off Arkansas. I mean, you look at South Carolina's wins. They beat Washington State. They beat Rice, which could possibly be an NCAA tournament team. They beat Kentucky, which was also very impressive as well. It's just that they have quite a plethora of bad losses. Like, they lost to Alabama, which is the second worst team in the SEC. Yeah, who would have thunk? Alabama is not the best in terms of women's volleyball, in terms of the SEC. When they're the juggernaut when it comes to football. So that's all my matchups for Saturday. For Sunday, this is basically the ranked versus ranked party. So the first matchup, and this is probably the matchup of the week, is number 5 Wisconsin at number 9 Minnesota. This is basically Minnesota's last chance at possibly still keeping its hopes alive of winning the Big Ten. Wisconsin definitely needs to win this to keep themselves in first place, because as I said earlier in the show, I made a mistake when it came to talking with one of my followers on Twitter. I said Wisconsin and Nebraska won't be meeting the rest of the way, but then I said I made a mistake, and Nebraska and Wisconsin do face one another. So Wisconsin definitely needs the win in order to keep themselves afloat of the Big Ten, because that matchup against Nebraska is going to be a barn burner. Minnesota at this point cannot afford another loss in the SEC, just because Minnesota losing to Purdue really set them back. I expected better from Minnesota, especially at home. I thought Hugh McCutcheon's teams were supposed to be ready for the Big 12 or Big 10. Like, come on. But I'm not counting out Minnesota. However, if I was a gambling man, I would have probably said Wisconsin will win. But who knows? Keeping up in the Big Ten, we have number 15 Penn State at number 10 Ohio State. The last time these two teams met, Penn State gave Ohio State the biggest butt-whooping of a lifetime as they stomped the living daylight out of Ohio State. I'm not trying to be mean to Ohio State, but I was very surprised to see Penn State demolishing Ohio State. So, for Ohio State, if they want to have any sort of hope of making the NCAA tournament, they need a win out. It's that simple. Except not really, because they have quite a bit of teams to face. But this is probably the worst matchup they could ever ask for. Like, outside of this matchup, Ohio State has a favorable schedule going forward. It's just that Ohio State is going to have to play very smart against Penn State. Penn State knows they are still in contention for the Big Ten crown, and Ohio State knows that a loss could thin their chances of possibly being a top 16 team and hosting a regional portion of the NCAA tournament. So Ohio State really needs to be careful here. They cannot underestimate Penn State. I know they kind of struggled with Northwestern, but they are coming off of an impressive victory over Illinois. So we'll see what happens with the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions. And then jumping over to the Pac-12, we have number 19 Stanford at number 17 Utah. Utah can still win the Pac-12, but a lot needs to happen for them in order to win said Pac-12. Stanford, on the other hand, is trying to improve its possible seeding. Like, Stanford is definitely a lock for the NCAA tournament. It's just that can they be a top 16 team, and can they, hence the word can they, host an NCAA regional portion of the tournament? It's looking doubtful. They did have that terrible stretch where they didn't have Kendall Kipp, Alex Lugay, and Cammie Minor. But those three are back, and I think Stanford will be a well-oiled machine going forward. Like, Utah is probably the last toughest matchup that Stanford will get. Like, if Stanford could get through Utah, I think they're in the clear to possibly make one final push at a top 16 seed. But it all depends. Like, you also have to keep an eye out for what happens with Washington and UCLA. You also have to keep an eye out for what happens with Utah. Like, nothing is guaranteed, especially in this conference. And then, speaking of the Pac-12, the last noteworthy matchup of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Week for Week 13 is number 16 Oregon at number 12 Washington. Washington is in a great position to possibly win the Pac-12 conference. But the problem is this. They're currently number 12, but if they lose along the way, they could fall further back, and more importantly, they could lose the higher seed over UCLA. That said, Utah has to be careful with Oregon. This is a rivalry game, and anything can happen, and they can't afford to fall behind 0-2 and expect to win. It's not going to work like that. I honestly think Washington will win, but they cannot underestimate Oregon. Oregon is fighting for a top 16 seed, and a win over Washington would basically solidify them. I would not be surprised if Oregon, with this win, would be a top 16 team. But they have to get past Oregon, or they have to get past Washington first. If they do so, then that could spoil Washington's chances of winning the not the NCAA tournament, the Pac-12, and possibly hurt them going forward when it comes to the NCAA tournament. I think Oregon has a phenomenal team. I think they have a talented team, but can they take down another powerhouse in the Pac-12? That still remains to be seen. Like, this is the biggest week for Oregon this week, as they face Washington State on Friday, then they face Washington on Sunday, which could basically mean make or break for them come NCAA tournament time. So there's that. And I guess a sneaky good matchup for this week would be Arizona State at UCLA. UCLA basically is in the lead when it comes to the conference, but they did lose in straight sets to Oregon, and as they face a not-so-hot Arizona State team. Arizona State was blistering at one point, and they were even making the case for them being a possible NCAA tournament team. However, it's looking like Arizona State's starting to come back to reality, but I would not underestimate Arizona State if I were UCLA. Like, Arizona State is just as good, and while I say UCLA has the most favorable schedule in the conference of all the conference teams, at least a part of the top portion of the conference, UCLA cannot underestimate anybody. They just cannot. I feel this is UCLA's Pac-12 conference to lose, but if they decide to go into relaxation mode or overconfidence mode or put everything on McMay mode, it's not going to end well for UCLA. That said, I'm confident UCLA can beat Arizona State and Arizona, because Arizona State and USC are kind of the two toughest teams on their schedule. But that said, Arizona State is the toughest one between them and USC. Arizona State can pose a huge threat to possibly making the NCAA tournament as an at-large. USC, on the other hand, they need to win out their games, and I don't see that happening. Yes, I could see them beating the Arizona schools. No, I don't see them beating Stanford and UCLA. Again, I will eat my crow if I'm wrong, but I doubt I'll be wrong. And then also closing out the noteworthy matchups for Week 13's NCAA women's volleyball schedule is the Conference USA tournament. The quarterfinals are on Friday, semifinals are on Saturday, and then Sunday are the finals. My prediction, Western Kentucky versus Rice. Both teams have been potent in the Conference USA gameplay, and honestly, I would not be surprised if both those teams made it. I think Western Kentucky wins the whole tournament, but don't underestimate Rice. That is a very good team. They want redemption for what happened last year, where their first round got canceled due to a positive COVID test, and all in all, I think Rice is definitely out for a little revenge, and they're out to prove themselves. Like, Rice has had kind of the up and down season. They haven't had that big breakthrough victory, but this could be their opportunity if, hence the word if, they defeat Western Kentucky and win the whole thing. They still have to get past the quarterfinals and semifinals, though. So that's basically going to do it for Week 13's matchups to watch for, as well as the Conference USA preview. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. Without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all very much for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate you all. If you listened live, I appreciate you. If you listened via the playback, I appreciate you. Shout out to my boy Larry B in the chat room. He was tuning in. I appreciate you for tuning in, my brother. I'm glad to have you in the chat room, keeping me company. And for those that listened, whether it's in the wee hours of the morning, in the afternoon, or any time of the day, I definitely appreciate you. For everybody here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action, whether it's high school, college, semi-pro, NCAA Division 2, NCAA Division 3. And I will see you on Friday, for real this time, for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. You all have yourself a great rest of the night. Thank you, Larry B, for saying that. He says, great show, brother. I appreciate you. You did a great job with 3 and Out as well. You always do a great job with your shows, and I appreciate it. But for everyone else, Peace!